Clinical supervision with feedback-informed treatment and deliberate practice.
The Alice videos are a synthesis of several cases over time that offered some element of therapeutic success used to enhance this clinical supervision demonstration.
This then is a role play with actors and the actress. The therapist will be John J. Beggs, who is a qualified supervisor in the state of Florida, and the supervisee will be George Jacinto. I will have been in practice for about 10 years, coming back to engage in deliberate practice with the direction of a supervisor. And then Alice will be played by Julia Bucky. Good afternoon, JJ. It's good to see you today. I wanted to review the case of Alice today. I've done some previous dream work with her husband and her youngest son, who was her favorite son. Now I've discovered that she has the ability to do lucid dreaming, and I want to kind of go over what I'm thinking with that. Last year, when working with her grief, she told me that she was having dreams of her husband and her son. So I inquired about what the dreams were like. And she said her husband's messages to her were of concern and love. And I asked her to repeat some positive comments from the husband that she had in the dream. And she noticed that her husband did not mention anything negative related to her previous marriage with him. He was not blaming her for anything. So Alice thinks maybe he let go of any disputes during the time they were married and had continued to have a genuine concern for her. She would continue to go through these, machinations of blaming herself. And I said, Alice, what did your husband say in the dream? Now, can we remember back? What was he saying to you about taking care of yourself? And she said, well, that's true. So eventually she got to the point where she realized that she didn't have to hold on to these feelings any longer and was able to let go. In the case with the husband, that was a fairly successful because she had recurring dreams from the husband, but they were positive and not negative. So that original dream work, I think, really laid the foundation for us doing lucid dreaming now with something that's quite different. We also worked with dreams of her son James, who was the youngest of the children, who affirmed her in the dreams. His dreams were more about her negative associations with the other children, and he would always tell her that she always did what she thought was best. These were things in the dreams that he said to her, and he kept encouraging her to let go of these negative associations because a lot of it had to do with their stuff, their thinking, their lives, as opposed to her. And this meshed with some earlier stuff we talked about, that when people are angry with us or yelling at us, they're really dealing with their own issues, and a lot of times it's nothing to do with us. Like the son we're going to be working with has had a serious addiction problem since early adolescence, which really began to fracture their relationship early on and led to him assaulting her and the other things that went on during that time.
If I could just jump in real quick.
Yeah.
So the dream work, as you call it, that you've utilized with her thus far, this has been more so in the past up until what, just this last session?
No, this is over. We got through this. That's the strange thing. That's why I was referred to her. And so that sort of passed, and that really hasn't come up much. It's probably been over a year, because that's mainly our initial work. And then there's more of these concerns with the other children that we've been working on,
I
and
understand.
not getting very far, as you know, in our discussions. And so I remember the other week that since nothing's going, and she's complaining about nightmares, that maybe there's something there that we could work with. And I have worked with lucid dreaming before.
I personally do not have experience in dream work and whatnot. I mean, certainly, I don't think that means we can't work together on this or anything along those lines. But just so you understand that I'm not coming from an expert standpoint on potentially some of the topic material that might come up. To my knowledge, this is also not per se a evidence based practice. I think there's mixed research at best out there. So I was curious to know if you have or intend to go over some type of informed consent with your client on this one with Alice. What a little bit of that might look like.
Well, she and I have talked about that. The dream work I did with her earlier was really a simple process. So, we talked about mainly I just took the messages she was getting, which were positive. I mean, thank goodness, because people don't always get the positive ones, and that's more challenging. But since these dreams were positive, that was kind of a good foundation to move into this next iteration. And so I told her that dreams, there's different types of dreams. Nightmares usually are higher self trying to get our attention about some unfinished business that's there that maybe needs to be looked at, and that there may be no outcome to what she does. The dreams may continue. The dreams may stop based on what intervention she might do if she was able to, in the dream, turn and face the person. But also generally speaking, I was trying to work with her becoming more self-confident and assertive at 75. And part of the problem was her roommate. For some reason, the roommate was like a mother, but actually she was more like her father, who used to give the orders in the house as opposed to the mother. But this roommate would point at her and tell her that she was always making the wrong decisions, and that she didn't know why she didn't speak up for herself. I had her begin to practice with the roommate as well. So what I went to was the development of scripts that she would say when something came up that she was uncomfortable with. She wouldn't do the role playing with me or the gestalt per se, but she was willing to read the script so she could get a feel about how it felt and how the other person might respond. Because I use this sort of up and down, where one is an object of someone's orders as opposed to being equal, and so we've played with this along the way, and so that's been helpful in her and I talking through it. But she actually did confront her roommate about 2 weeks ago, which I thought was a nice lead into the dream, because if we're doing things in waking life, and if she indeed is able to lucid dream and do it in her dreaming life, she'd be able to offset future nightmares about it because she can resolve that. But also in waking life, she can continue to practice being self-confident, who she is, and sharing how she feels. So I think in both worlds, it's interesting in dreaming, because I was looking at dreaming, but I'm thinking, well, heck, she's not doing it in real life, because she's always felt like she was, lower in terms of the establishment of whoever was with her. And so we've talked about that. And so the roommate doesn't know what to do, as you'll see in the session. She says, well, now I notice that she doesn't jump on what she was saying. She's not quite sure what to say because she's not sure what I'm going to say. So I thought that a good direction. Basically,
Also, it sounds like effectively you have her practicing the so-called dream state that should come through with working with the roommate and practicing with the roommate, which will hopefully also come through what's going on with what's happening within this lucid dream session.
Right. And I've recently researched again on the academic literature lucid dreaming.
Excellent.
And I discovered that good article that the VA had been doing veterans, and they discovered that while it didn't affect a lot in terms of the dream issues themselves, it tended to lower people's depression and anxiety levels.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a rash of other research people doing lucid dreaming work. Some of it is in waking life in the therapist's office. They have them do a guided sort of thing, as opposed to them doing it at night and discovering their dreaming and doing the lucid work. So there's different directions that are going in. But the VA said they thought there needed to be more research in this area. It looks promising. And I think I've had a couple other clients over time that I've done some lucid dreaming work with that really were helped by it. So I explained to her that we're going to, some protective measures we're taking. For instance, I'm going to have you write a script so that you're ready with the script when you turn and face John. And you don't turn and face John and don't know what to say, but you want to comport yourself differently than when he was a child and you both lost it and yelled, because you don't want to lose your control of your emotions. You want to have some balance with this. And so I think she practiced it in the last week or so, and she's done quite well with it. And before I launched into doing it, I just wanted to have another review of the case with you to feel more comfortable in terms of what I'm doing and the type of dream work, which is different. See, the earlier dream work was positive. Therefore, I thought this may have potential as well, because she was getting positive messages in earlier dreams that were supporting her in relationship to her current crisis. So it seemed like the earlier crises were really kind of the foundation for what she's really working on now. She's had these dreams over the course of her life. These nightmares are not new. I really think that metaphor and artwork is extremely powerful, and I've taught this for years in my classes with students back when I was teaching, that the pictures that people produce have so much richness in them that if you're in talk therapy, people can hide stuff, but when they're doing art, it sort of comes out in the picture and deepens the work with the individual. So reviewing again, I explained lucid dreaming to Alice, and that she can change the outcome of the dream. I told her she was a producer, writer, and actor in her own dreams, and that in lucid dreaming, you have the option of changing to a more positive outcome if that's what you would like to do. So then, as I did that, I threaded her work with her roommate about being more assertive to have her needs met in the relationship with her. Then Alice, like with the roommate, who I had Alice divide a script for, which we practiced and seemed to have success, I had her develop a script to deal with John. And I asked her to focus more on what we called I statements that would help her control her delivery of what she wanted to say. When you say that, I feel. I clarified makes me feel it doesn't work. I threw that in and then I fixed it when we were talking because I wanted to make sure that she wasn't going to blame someone for making her feel, but rather when you say this, I stressed that yelling would put her back where she was and derail the work that she's going to go through. So she tested the script on me, and she's now ready to use it in the dream. I had her do it a couple times, but this coming week I'll have her. I turn around so she sees the back of my head and can visualize John as opposed to my disturbing that, and she liked that as an approach. So I encouraged her that when in the dream, when she turns and faces, she wants to make sure she grounds herself, and so that's what I thought she's done pretty well with that. And a couple of weeks ago, she got stuck and she said, "Now I'm talking to John, but what do I say to him?" And so I suggested, "Well, is there something further you want to ask?" And so that extended the work with her at that point. So I think this week it looks like we're ready for the activity.
I like this notion of turning and facing the conflict, right? Because this, again, ties right back into this assertiveness that you've been working overall with her, whether it be working with the roommate, whether it be working with, whether it be a true dream, whether it be a daydream, whether it be, being lost in those thoughts and trapped within that metaphor of, but really the raw emotion that sounds like composes or compiles the relationship that she has with her son or had with her son, her youngest. I think to be able to take that and find a way to work with that, it sounds like it's very important to this client. Not to mention when we start looking at elements of quality of sleep, overall quality of life, reducing stress levels. It sounds like this is right where that work needs to begin, right? Even though we're not a little bit on the fringe. I wouldn't say we're fully on the fringe, but we're a little bit on the fringe. I think, it still falls within that kind of realm of trauma-informed care, right? As far as allowing this process to develop and allowing the client to deliver to you what their needs are. So overall, I think it's really good, George.
Having her draw the script for herself in the dream has her changing. So even before she gets into the dream, she's changed the direction of the dream as the producer, director, and writer. So it positions her in charge when she goes into the dream, right? Because she's in charge. She's going to turn around, she's going to stand, and she's going to read a script, which is kind of what lucid dreaming is about. And so I think that having the confidence practicing, I think, helps set up the success for the outcome of what she's doing. And I think I'm hopeful and I'm pretty confident because I've seen others who were in such severe conflicts with a family member resolve some issues by lucid dreaming.
And it's empowering, right? To be able to particularly when we work with an individual who's been within that abusive relationship and in those abusive patterns for such an extended period of time that clearly something has stuck around within the subconscious. To be able to regain control of that, even at her age, is remarkable, and I'm sure probably very maybe frightening in one hand for her, but also probably very very relieving for her too.
I think she really is feeling affirmed by the changes with the roommate. So I think that's a good step in further work. I think if she sticks to the script, which I think she's able to do because we've done it now enough, so she's got it down, she's almost memorized it. She'll have self-confidence because she will actually turn and face. I think that whole movement is important.
Mm-hmm.
And then reading it. And of course, he would be kind of a deer in headlights because that's the pattern. She's breaking the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
My suspicion is the dream may end shortly after she does that with him with the deer in headlights. She's not going to let him take it and go on with it. The dream will end. I didn't give her anything after the script. We'll see what happens. Although I think her practice has been good, but she's already done this with someone. Hello, Alice. I'm looking forward to working with you today, and we're going to continue with our discussions from the past several weeks. You've been doing really well with the writing of the script, and then your roommate. I think that you and Gloria now are. I know you were feeling like she was treating you like a child over the past number of months that you've been roommates, and your script last week. You told me that things were going a little better. And your script was something to this effect: I don't get the sense that you're my mother, Gloria. That's how I feel when you speak to me. While I make decisions that you're not happy about, they're my decisions, and I'm comfortable with them. How did that go? I'd like to know how you felt after that and how it's going now.
Dr. J, I was so happy. I said, "You are not my mother." And I thought, what's she going to do? And she didn't do anything. So we've been okay. I can tell she's, would the word be tentative? She's not quite sure what to do with me now.
Well, you're taking charge, and you're different, taking charge for yourself. You're more on an even level now, aren't you?
I guess.
Before she had you feeling like, you were below her in terms of that child feeling. Remember we talked about that. And now you're kind of so how does that even keel part feel, even though she's somewhat tentative? How does that feel for you?
Good, really good.
So it feels good to put yourself out there and not be just going with the flow.
Yes, it did with her anyway. She's so bossy.
Very good. But being on the same level, I think, is a different position to be in. And I think over time, as you begin to do this in other parts of your life, you're going to begin to feel much more good about Alice as well, right? Because you're going to be kind of sticking with how you feel and letting people know that, and it's okay, and you're okay. We've been talking about that for some time. So, anything else going on with or questions about your situation with Gloria?
No.
Okay. Well, let's move then to your son John, who we've been working with over the past several weeks. Have you had another nightmare this week with someone chasing you in the dream?
Yes.
When you were in that dream, like we've been talking about, trying to notice, you knew you were dreaming at the time you were in the dream?
I suppose I did. I was scared.
Okay. Well, you've shared that concern, and you had done this nice script for confronting John, as we've talked about, the lucid dreaming we've talked about over the past several weeks, that you're kind of the producer, writer, and director of your own dreams. You have the ability to change what's going on in a dream if you know you're dreaming. And we talked about safety issues in case in the dream you feel frightened, that there are things you can do to protect yourself, as possibly being invisible or doing other things. What's comfortable for you to be safe in the dream if it doesn't quite go exactly how you're wanting it?
Dr. George, I'm always outside, and sometimes I don't have a place to hide. And I just want to run behind something, a tree, building, something to kind of make sure I'm not attacked,
Right. And this has been the ongoing experience of your life, being attacked, opposed to being able to. We've talked about this thing about standing and asserting yourself, which I think you've been starting to do, for instance, with Gloria. And we talked about this in the dream with John. Because we both are pretty sure that John is facing you. Last week we did the script. Remember, you and I kind of worked together with the script. I turned my head around so that you could visualize it as being John and not me. How did you feel over the week coming away from that? Because we weren't going to have you do the confrontation in the dream until this next week if you happen to have it, because we need to practice it again. How did you feel when we practiced that?
Dr. George, can I tell you something? Just between us,
Mm-hmm.
at 75, a part of me feels kind of bad that I didn't do this before, And the other part of me feels like it's about time, Alice.
Well, that's good to hear yourself say that. There's always a good time whenever that happens, right, in our lives. And we grow no matter how old we get in terms of who we are, who we understand we are. And so you're at the moment. We have to be at the right time, don't we? And you're exhausted from this experience of having to hide or run for cover rather than standing and facing it. And that's what you did last week in our role play. It sounded pretty solid, because you were also in control of how you were feeling. You weren't letting your emotions get out of control, but you were trying to stand there and present Gloria, and this is who I am, and see who I am. And so I like that in terms of your script as well. That I thought worked pretty well. So I guess what I'm asking is, in light of how well you've done with Gloria, and I think you need to really kind of give yourself some credit at beginning to stand up like that. But do you think that this week, if the dream recurs, you might be able to, if we practice this again, give it a try and dream?
I'll try, because it felt so, what do you call it,
Empowering?
It felt so good. It made me feel like I was, as my mama used to say, I was worth something.
Yes, very good. And as you do it in the dream, then you're able to do it when you're awake more too, right? I mean, because the Gloria thing is an example of doing it when you're awake. But in our dreams, if we can change the story, we change the story of our life. As we've been talking about how, you talked about how you have felt with that, and then also with Gloria. But then you become more comfortable in who you are in terms of putting it out there. People can finally see all of Alice who you are, and who you are is a very likable person, as we've talked about, and someone who's more self-assured than maybe she's done a lot of work over the past 2 years getting here. So I think this is a good time. And so do you want to give this a try again in terms of your role playing with me, being chased, stopping? See, the key is to stop and turn. That's the most important behavior you're going to demonstrate in your dream. You're going to stop and turn and then deal with it. You did that well last week when you were dealing with it. And so, but then, the dream will probably end right after. You may see the deer in headlights look on his face. The dream can end as you get across your message. Because you don't have anything to lose, do you?
No.
Okay. So remember, you want to kind of try to approach it somewhat cool, asserting who you are and your message. And then as we do this morning, I'd like to again review how you feel about it after, how you feel being in charge, how you feel being on the same level, subject, as opposed to being someone's object, equal level, rather, you're not at the same level as someone that's been doing this all these years, but you're at an equal level.
Okay, so to make sure I'm doing it like we talked, I'm not supposed to be angry. I don't need to get upset with him.
The thing you don't want to do is lose control again, because that's what the pattern has been in the past.
Okay.
You lose control, you yell at each other, and then there's an impasse. In this situation, you want to assert who you are without losing it. You want to say, this is me, and I'm tired of this. And so you can emote, but it's within the parameters of being in control of the situation. See, when he sparked you before, put you off balance, and you were out of control in a sense because you were so angry. And anger is, we've talked about anger and understand how that works, but then what you want to do here is make sure that you're getting your message across in a way that it's not yelling or, we've talked about that. And I messages, we've talked about are the best. Make me feel. I feel. No one makes us feel. I feel like this when you say this to me. And then, you wanted to talk about, in his case, when you stop blaming me, your mother, you're in your 40s now. Whatever you want to do. But I think those are good questions to raise as you had done. And I thought somewhat successfully last week.
I think I'm ready.
Good. Okay. That's the way to go when we're ready. So basically what you're going to do is pick up as if you're in the dream being chased, and you're going to turn. Now, I'm going to turn my head around so you can visualize John instead of me. Tell me what's happening in the dream. Like, say, I'm running, I'm going to stop and turn around or whatever. Sort of tell me the story as it's happening, and then say the script to John, okay?
Okay, I'll do that. I'm running down a hill in my papa's pasture, and all of a sudden I look around over my shoulder, and there's somebody coming over the hill, and it's John, and he has this real angry look on his face, and I start running faster, and I can't go any faster. So then I trip on a little rock, and it almost makes me fall, and I have to stop. So I turn around, and I just plant my feet, and I'm getting to feel tired of this. And he's still running toward me, and I say, John, I'm your mother. Stop. I've had enough. And he slows down, and he's stopping. And I tell him, you and I have done this all your life. And I feel that you attack me for no reason. There's no reason. I am your mother. So stop. And he's just standing there, Dr. George. He's just standing. I don't know.
Anything else you would like to say to him?
I want our time together to be better. You're 40, and at my age, we don't have that much more time. I want us to get along. I want you, my firstborn son, to treat me better like you did when you were little. Not that way exactly, but you showed me love, and I feel like now you don't love me. Dr. George, I don't know what else to say.
The dream ends. Okay, you can stop the dream. That was very powerful. That second part where you stopped and then you began again when I suggested, is there more? That was really a powerful statement you made. And you got to the crux of the situation. People don't understand the power of a mother's love, even when she's been abused. How did it feel? You said your piece. This was really a good assertive experience.
I felt that I said the right things to him.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, toward the end, I was remembering the day he was born.
Ah, yes.
And it was such a powerful experience being a mother for the first time. And I thought I would really try so hard to be a good one. And I was, but maybe I didn't. His daddy did so much with him, and I just let him do that because over the years, John was really stubborn and headstrong. And I just felt I couldn't deal with it. So I didn't know what else to say, Dr. George. I remember John being such a sweet boy. And then we just kind of went this way. And then he got nasty toward me. And I didn't understand why, but it didn't make me happy. And I guess the more he talked to me that way, the more I pulled away from him. And so any time he started raising his voice and talking to me like that, I would pull back. And every time he'd do it, it hurt. And then I found myself just getting angry, like, why did you do this to me? I'm your mom. We were close, and then you just became ugly.
You had talked about this progress over time with him, drug addiction issues that had come up too, remember in our discussions, which really kind of in adolescence changed him somewhat markedly and has sort of dogged him throughout his life from what you were saying. But the important thing here is that you do remember him as a child who was someone quite now as a adult male. What we've talked about in the past, because you're not ready yet either, but we talked about this idea of forgiveness. But forgiveness has us understanding that the other party has, like all of us, has different parts of ourselves that seem to be more prominent in other times in our lives. And you're not having thought of his childhood for a long time is an interesting kind of return in terms of your reflection. And I thought that was an important part of, because mother has the whole picture of life, opposed to friends that come in and out. And I think that your sense of that is important. And I think it came across in your script that you put together, because that script was more approaching him and a balanced sense of your understanding of who he is. And it's okay for that dream to end after you say your piece, because he may, if it was in real life, he may have been shocked and not knowing what to do with it, like your roommate. Oh, she's acting different now. But also bringing back the truth of who you are. I mean, I think living your truth is important. So getting back to your sense of coming out of that, as far as being assertive of Alice, where are you now with that? And it sounds like you're ready to do this in the dream, the way it was so nicely done. What are your feelings on all of this?
Do you think I can do it in the dream? Do you think it's really possible?
Oh, I'm convinced you can do it because we've worked together for some time.
Okay.
It's very possible. I mean, because you're the director of your dream, see, so you got to take control of the dream because that's your dream.
Okay.
And you're going to transform the dream by turning and facing, which is really a good, behavior or process. When you start feeling like this in the future, you'll know it's time to stop and face it, as opposed to keep letting it go. Like with Gloria and things going over your head and letting her do her thing, rather than stopping her and dealing with correcting what's going on. But you're doing that now. So you're able to do it with Gloria, which you probably didn't see yourself doing. And now you've practiced in the dream a couple times. So actually doing it in the dream now gives you the chance to really be somewhat comfortable in standing and doing it because you've worked on it. So if we have an idea of what we're doing, it's much easier to do.
Okay, so if I have this dream, we're going to talk about it like we did today about Gloria?
Yes,
right?
We'll want to talk about it next week.
Okay.
We will talk about it next week if you're able to have this dream, because I think you're going to come away from it feeling even more confident, because the more you practice this, the better it gets, right? Practice makes perfect, as they say. So you've done it with Gloria. You've done it twice in terms of practice for the dream. So now doing it in the dream, you're finally Alice, who's in charge of her life, and she can do this alone, listening to your inner voice. And we'll talk about it. I think this is going to be a really good week for you. I mean, it's a big step, but I think you can do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be working with you to try it, because I think it's a very healing kind of moment for you.
Thank you.
Is there anything you want to ask about it? I mean, our session is going to close shortly, and I just was wondering if there's anything that I could offer to you that might be supportive in having you feel more comfortable working through that. Or are you just going to try it?
Our time like this together has just helped me so much. And I just kind of knowing that you're almost like a coach. You're kind of like the kids' coaches were on the sideline when they played sports, And I want to do this. I do. So, and it needs to stop. And you've let me know that.
But see, you're the one doing the work, because only you can do it. But you had to come to a point where and you had to come to the point where you're ready to do it. See, we only do things when we're ready. It doesn't matter if we're 90 and we do it. But you're doing it in the 70s, so it gives you a few more years to kind of be Alice, who Alice wants to be, and who now feels comfortable being. That's the real, that's kind of like a birthday gift at 75. I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
Because you're reborn again as part of you is coming to the fullness of who you are in terms of growth as well. You're never too old to grow. And I think that's also a very positive thing that we've talked about. So if you're okay with that, we will meet next week at the same time, and I think we're going to have good news from our work. I'll see you next week then. And
Okay.
I know you can do this. And
Bye-bye.
You do too.
How are you today?
Good. I'm really kind of pleased with how things went as well last week with my session with Alice before she will hopefully have the dream this week.
George, I'd like to begin by asking you how this kind of initial conversation went. I know we had talked about planning it out and mapping it out. When you actually sat down with Alice, how do you feel it went? And can you tell me a little bit about how you delivered it and what it looked like?
Okay, and as you had viewed it, but from my point of view, basically, I reviewed her work with Gloria because she's been doing this in waking life as well, and so we looked at her experience with Gloria, and she explained to me how that went. And she said that Gloria didn't know what to do when she first brought this about, and then seemed tentative after, but she felt really good about being able to do this, and it seems to have had a positive element to it in terms of how she felt more enabled and confident from the experience. Then I went to the dream with John, and we talked about how she's the producer, writer, and director of her dreams, and she can determine what goes on and when the dream would end, which would be when she decides the script ends. That's when the dream will most likely end, if she can end it. And so we talked a little bit about that, and I asked her if she had any questions or, the issues, safety issues that we talked about before. I kind of alluded to a discussion about getting her into looking at that. And she talked about how she felt that in her dreams, she's always running out in the open and there's no place for to take cover. And then I immediately connected that back to her life experience of not asserting herself. And like sometimes she's not really running for cover physically, but she's running for cover in plain sight. I didn't use those terms, but I was trying to talk about how this has been kind of a familiar experience, and that what she really needs to do is to take control and confront and to the positioning. She's done that now once, and then she's did it again during the session I was with her to again practice. And she kind of got a sense of that because she also notices that that's partly what she was doing with Gloria over the past few weeks as well. So I had her practice again this time. I did some kind of cheerleading about this, and then I turned my head like I had done the previous time and asked her to visualize John. And, she went along with this. She got a little stuck with it in terms of the script. And so I said, is there something else you would want to say, or something to that effect? And then she was able to conclude her work with that. And she felt fairly good again after having the practice experience. And so I encouraged her to, she asked me, do you think I can do this? And I really reassured her again, because that's the one thing that sort of happened along the time with Gloria, too. And so she felt she was ready to do this as the session ended this week. But I've continued to try to tie the waking and dream lives together, because she's actually doing it in both spaces, where this is kind of a holistic thing for her, because she's Alice everywhere she's at, as opposed to Alice in the waking life and running still in the dream life. And she felt good about trying this week as she went forward. And that's kind of a summation of how I felt the session went. And I'm curious to see how she does this when she describes it to me next week. I'm pretty sure she's going to have the dream again this week.
Right. Well, it sounds like you guys are making some really strong progress together, so I'm happy to hear that. In addition to that, it kind of almost sounds like it effectively exposure therapy on two fronts in some respects.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you have her practicing this assertiveness in both real life as well as within this dream state, and utilizing experiences from the other to reinforce the other instance. I think that could be very, very strong and very positive. I like what I hear from you as far as not just the reassurance, because I don't think you're engaging in too much reassurance, right? And when we deal with exposure, we want to try to avoid reassurance. But there is a lot of empowerment, right? Your language remains very strength-based and very supportive, and I think that's also indicative and reflective of the very strong rapport that you have with this client and the amount of trust that she has in you. as her provider. Go ahead.
I liked toward the end of the session, she said that I reminded her of her children's coaches when they were doing various sports events, that the coach was always there and cheering them on. And then she talked about feeling empowered during one part of this as well. And I think that was really a good thing, because it established her kind of comfort level, and that. But I think this whole deliberate practice stuff that you and I are doing in terms of the feedback-informed approaches is what she was doing too. She's actually been practicing, and I said that. I said practice makes perfect, and indeed it does in whatever levels we're doing it. But she was doing deliberate practice, because whether it was the back of my head or whether she was directly dealing with Gloria, it was happening, and then it became part of her way of expressing self. And so I think that was a good summary. We spent a long time coming together to get to this point, so I'm kind of in the celebrational mood myself. I think she's probably not going to need to be seeing me much longer than another month or two at the most, and she'll be on her own feeling okay.
Excellent. So one thing, right, whenever we're dealing with exposure, safety is always an issue that comes up. And I know we've talked a little bit about this, but just to rehash it real quick, just to do a check-in, where is she at as far as feeling safe throughout this practice? And what is your plan for crisis if that should arise?
Well, I think that, she did raise that question again during the session, and I tried to reassure her that she's done such preparation, or getting to the point where she's able to, finally she's getting confidence in confronting, because she had done it with Gloria, and now she can do it in the dream. And that the script was important. See, I think that I can't overemphasize the importance of having that script and being ready to use it. And then to end when the script ends, because she asked me about what is he going to do, and I said, well, you probably don't have to worry about too far into that, because your script doesn't go there. I said, maybe your script goes to seeing him with headlights in his eyes, and then the dream ends. But I said, I suggested it as the script. The important part of the script was her saying what she had to do, turning and confronting, because I emphasize this turning and confronting kind of motion, and that she would be able to do that successfully. I'm not anticipating her having a traumatic experience from this dream, because we've prepared rather well for it, and in the same process that we prepared for Gloria, because Gloria could have turned around and screamed at her. But what was interesting is it sort of gave Gloria some sort of imbalance, because she was getting what she'd never gotten before, and so it sort of like caused some kind of confusion about what the heck's going on. And I thought that was, so she gave me that example in our discussion this time too. And so I think that I'm not worried about the dream being any different than previous dreams in terms of the level of trauma, because it's going to end.
Right. And certainly this is something she's been dealing with for several years at this point. And
I emphasized to her, again, there's a lot of subtext here, that in the past they yelled at each other, and that's what threw her off, and it went the other way. So I've emphasized very clearly that she needs to keep in control. Not that she can't be angry, but she needs to be in control of her emotions, so she can assert what she wants to say and her point without losing it. Like John has always been able to get her to do that, because they'll yell at each other and it doesn't go anywhere. So I tried to emphasize in sort of a subtle way as I could that it would be best to, now you're in charge. See, I kept inserting that you're in charge, which says that you're not going to let this get out of control, because part of the control in the past was a two-way street, wasn't it?
Right.
And in fact, she never turned to face him anyway. She just kept running. So this time, again, like with Gloria, turning and facing is quite a jarring sort of thing to whoever the chaser is, because of the way things work. So I think this will be successful, because there's been a couple of attempts at trying it. And the important thing I can't stress here is the script. She has a script she's written, and she needs to stick to her script, which we've worked on. And by doing that, there isn't too much room for much to happen after she says her piece.
Right. And it sounds like you have high confidence in that she will stick to that script.
Right, and next week what I want to go into with her after this is over is, what was her stance? Did she just turn and stand, or did she do something else that further asserted her presence and her intent? And then if so, trying to figure out, then, we haven't done this before, because I wanted to wait till we get her to a point where she's been somewhat successful, to go back and look in the past at how she has physically felt, what were the red flags when you were about to disconnect? When people are coming at you and you just let them go. So I'm hoping to have her tell me where she experienced it, to see if we can match that with her assertive stance, where the assertive stance stops the trigger that starts with the red flag. So
Right.
I'm waiting to see where that's at for her. We haven't discussed it before. My guess would be it may be around the solar plexus, or it may be up in here by the neck. I'm waiting to see which one she describes it. Whatever she does, we'll go with the flow of it, and then I'll try to explain how that is offset now that she has a new approach to it, with the success she had in the dream. So I'm hoping she has more than just turning and standing. I'm hoping there's some other little piece that jumps in and really, reinforce that if I'm starting to feel this way, I do this positioning or I do this stance, and that gets me off into the control of the situation as opposed to losing it.
Oh, and this, I mean, once again, taking something from the dream state into reality, this is something that she could actually rehearse, whether it be in front of a mirror or just finding, depending, provided she has the same degree and level of mobility in her dream as she does in real life. Which, right, because like I know for myself, when I dream, I have a lot less aches, pains, former football injuries, and all that. But provided those are on similar planes, whether she's practicing the Superman stance, whether she's just focusing on relaxing her arms or not clenching her fists, whatever that looks like. And you could even do some work in terms of scripting that out some.
Well, and it reminds me of the Whitney Houston song about the greatest love of all. When she starts getting confidence about herself, and I'm no longer in her life, she could do exactly what you just said: stand in the mirror and practice.
Right.
And because she's important enough to do that, and she has the skills to do it. That's why I keep trying to enforce the fact that I'm not doing this, someone else isn't doing this, you're doing this yourself, you're able to do this. And so that's the self-efficacy kind of stuff that I think she will hopefully take with her.
Well, right. And, I think the other thing, now that you are beginning to anticipate termination, so obviously at that point we begin to work up a plan for termination. What are the next steps, and what are the steps that she can continue to work on even when she's no longer seeing you, right? Because I think in order to sustain or maintain the progress that she's accomplished, she has to have it in the back of her mind that this is not something that she checks a box with you and then, everything's fine. She's going to need to continue to do the work even after you're not there.
Well, and I think your point last week about, as we led into this, which I haven't done yet, it would be to have her do some journal notations of what happened during this period. So after my next session with her, after the follow-up of the dream, we'll talk about how she might anchor this by doing some artwork and some journaling, so that in the future she can look back at what she did. Because it's a nice sort of place to be able to go back and review. And it also helps build self-confidence again, because she can see that she actually did this. So I want to structure that piece in a way that it could be beneficial in the future to shore up what she's doing at the time.
That sounds excellent, George.
So I think that kind of, is there something else? I think that kind of summarizes that. I felt fairly good about coming out of this session.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like you're in a very good place with it. It sounds like your client is feeling comfortable both with the intervention, and we talk about that important element of there being hope. And what I'm hearing differently this time around is we're not hearing the frustration that she just feels stuck. We're hearing that she's motivated and excited to try something new. So I think that carries a lot of weight as well.
Well, I think that we talk about common factors in different points of the past, but, this whole hope and expectation really makes sense, because I think we're kind of at the end of that in terms of this iteration of what we've been doing. It's coming to fruition. In succeeding sessions, I may reinforce that in terms of how she's done that, but I think that that's a positive outcome from all of this.
Absolutely. And then as far as your stretch goals go, structure being one of those primary elements that we're looking for, it really sounds like you're thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead now. You're beginning to really kind of focus on having that structure prepared both in session as well as one session to the next session. So I think that's a very good and positive thing too, George.
Well, and I think, the ORS and SRS, while numbers are attached and there's a tracking of that, which will show over time change, I think the structure of that as part of the session is wonderful, because coming in, you figure out what's gone on since we last were together. And then at the end, we review how this went in terms of what sense was she making out of our session, and then helping frame the homework. But that really helps in the sessions. Remember, one of my stretch goals has to do with how do I start and how do I end, and I think the two tools are very effective in structuring the beginning and the end of each session, and it helps move you in and out of the work. I'm really happy with the dynamics of that alone, much less having her give the numbers that we can track over time in terms of how she's responding as well. So I think the verbal and the statistical kind of things with this really is, I'm happy with this new structure of my work. And I appreciate your ability to help me kind of work with that, because I think over time it becomes a much easier sort of thing. But I really like the structure, because that's something I wasn't great with in the past. All of a sudden you come up and it's time to end. But this has a nice organized ending where you review in a very systematic way that becomes routine.
Right.
And I think that's a really powerful part of this expansion of my work in therapy.
Well, and it's once again, various transitions in life. Usually, when we talk about transitions, we think about larger life stages. But even as we go from middle of the session to concluding our session, that in itself is a transition. And wanting to give that respect and honor that period, because everything that you've seen and I've seen it in my own practice as well. When we have that quick kind of cutoff at the end, it leaves a different feeling. I don't want to say it's necessarily a negative feeling, but it can sometimes feel incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
Working towards having those smoother transitions is great, George, and I'm happy to hear that it's going very well for you.
I'm pleased as well. So we'll see what happens this week, and I'm looking forward to next week, because I'm hoping the outcome is as positive as I'm anticipating.
Yep, sounds great. So going into this next week, are you going to start employing the journaling at that point, or are you going to hold off for a couple of weeks here?
I think next week I'll try to process what happened, and reinforce. And then in the following week, I think I'll pick up with that, because I'm going to leave her with some things that we need to still do to help her really kind of cement this down for her before we come to termination. So I'm bring termination up next week, and then we will then build towards closure. And the following week, I will try to come to some structure of a journal with some artwork that will help begin to add to her work.
Yeah, my one suggestion on that, George, would be probably to utilize your clinical judgment. Don't necessarily plan on going into a discussion on termination, just because we don't know exactly how this experience went for her. And if she's feeling very vulnerable, and if it proves to be a little bit more of a difficult time for her than we anticipate, then it might be more appropriate to wait for that additional week before you have that discussion with her, just so she's not feeling abandoned in that moment.
Right. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, I have to kind of go with the flow, like you're saying. That sounds good.
But yeah, I think that's great. I think you're on a good trajectory, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Sounds good. See you then.
All right.
Well, good morning, fellas. And now we're going to move into our discussion today of the work that we've been doing. And as we've been doing in the past few weeks, I would like to have us do the outcome rating scale based on what happened and how things went for you during this past week as we lead into our discussion. I'm going to bring that up as we usually do here and have you provide me with the numbers again as we've been doing. But basically, I'll read this over again to kind of refresh our memories. Looking back over the last week, including today, help us understand how you've been feeling by rating how well you've been doing in the following areas of your life, where marks to the left represent low levels and marks to the right indicate high levels. So we're dealing again with the 0 to 10. So individually, how have you been doing personally during this past week in terms of your own personal well-being? What kind of number we find to that? And
maybe a 6 or 7. Pretty good.
Okay. And interpersonally this week, obviously you're not around your family, but you have close relationships and acquaintances there in the facility. How would you rate that this week in terms of your experience?
I would say maybe about an 8.
Okay. And back on individually, you said a 6 or a 7. Does it tend more towards the 6 or the 7? I just wanted to review that briefly.
7.
Okay. Thank you. Then moving on to socially, and you have a lot of friends and acquaintances there that enjoy talking with you. And of course, you don't have to work anymore or go to school. I mean, thank goodness that's years beyond us. But in terms of your friendships this week, how would you rate that? How did that go?
Those were good. 8.
Okay, thank you. And then overall, what was your general sense overall for the week as to how things went?
I'd say again, a 7.
Okay, very good. Thank you. But moving into how the week went, did you have the recurring dream again this week?
I did, Dr. George.
How did that go? Were you able to use the script, and what was the experience of that and the outcome?
I used it and it felt so very good.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you describe what went on in the dream? What were the change moments?
Well, as I've told you before, I'm always running down that same hill in the pasture. Always. So I turned around. And I said those very words that we said before in practice. And I told John, I am tired of this. This is going to have to stop. And he said, what? And his face all crunched up. And I kind of pulled my shoulders up.
Good sign.
I said, I am your mother. And his face just kind of went like, and then I woke up.
Okay. Now, going back into that experience, how did it feel after you had turned and faced him? What did that moment kind of feel like? I mean, how did you?
First, I was scared.
Mm-hmm.
I was, it's just, but then I thought, I did this with Dr. George, and I'm going to do it now.
Wow.
And I did.
And you also said something else that I think is, again, important in terms of future ways that you approach this. You said that you raised your shoulders. I really like that description, because that's the taking charge part. Is you looked, you hesitated, and you took. How did that, we talked last week about not allowing yourself to lose control of your feelings like in the past. How did that feel for you? You seem to be very successful with that. You were able to do it from what you're describing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's the way I used to talk to the kids when they were little.
Mm-hmm.
And they would not listen the first time. And that never makes me happy as a mom. And I just thought, I am his mother still.
Mm-hmm.
And he has no right to treat me the way he does. So it worked.
Oh, and you really grounded yourself. See, by turning and grounding, you stood. You were kind of mini confusion state briefly, but then when you raised your shoulders, that really situated you to deal with the issue. There were some physical things, I think, that really support you in what you're doing that you might be aware of in the future in terms of when someone is attempting to have you below as opposed to on even keel. So this subject as opposed to being someone's object. It seems like you're not going to do the object stuff much. You continue to work on making this your new approach to life. So then you came away from that, and that seems to, in your discussion on the outcome rating scale, seems like it may have had some effect on your experiences this week with others, like your encounters perhaps with Gloria. Did you have any kind of untoward events with Gloria this week, or did that go pretty smoothly?
None with her at all. She didn't say much to me.
Mm-hmm. There's an adjustment going on here, I think, in terms of the new you. And changing the approach. So then, other than that, then did things go pretty well this week?
Yes, and let me tell you, my friend Susie down the hall, I don't know if you've met her or not. She's always wanted me to go play bingo with her, and I would say, no, Susie, I'm not going. But this week, I went.
Wow, that's great. And did you enjoy yourself as you were there?
Yes, some of us who are friendly sat together and we really had fun.
Great.
It was nice.
Because you do have a lot of acquaintances, if not friends. And so this could be something new that you add to your routine, which could be a social event, which is nice. Getting you around more people at the same time and sharing. So that's a good. So looking at this week and your previous experiences with Gloria, how would you translate this more now in terms of your relationship with Gloria when she comes up with her next lecture about what you need to be doing? Is there anything that you learned from this that you might use that could help?
I just thought, Maybe I should see Gloria as a little girl like I did John.
Bringing a better understanding of who she is. That is really a very brilliant insight because it's kind of along what we've been talking about over the years about, well, usually when someone is really doing that sort of stuff, it's more about them than it is about you. Although things go back and forth, of course, but by her having to respond to you differently now, it places her also in a different relationship, both with yourself and with her. But you're having that insight about that, I think, is a helpful way of working with her. But again, you can still be on the same level, right? It's not that she's less than you or you're less than her, but you're still trying to operate from the adult level as opposed to the child, and so it's kind of more like we've talked about on even ground. I'd be interested in having conversations about your past as well.
Yes.
But the important thing is that you're feeling more confident and comfortable and relating a little differently. And as you do that, I think you'll be perhaps more content. We use the word happy and content, but I really think happy passes, but content is something that can be more of an even ongoing experience in our lives, that we feel confidence about who we are. We've worked on this now for a number of months, and I think you've really been reaching towards the goals of that you've begun to meet with me about. And what more can we do to help you solidify this? Because as we go on, eventually we'll probably stop seeing each other. I'd like for you to decide when you want to stop seeing me. I think that's a really healthy move. That way you're in charge of calling the shots. Another demonstration of how I'm not going to be upset with you. And I realize that in this sort of situation, when you reach the goal you've gotten to, perhaps time to stop. I mean, I'm always available in the future if something comes up. But how does that sit with you? Do you have any kind of thoughts about that?
Could we maybe just stay together for a few more times in
Sure.
case I have another dream? Because I would do the same thing in that dream, right?
Very good question. Thank you. If the dream recurs, you want to repeat it, but you might want to say, enough is enough. We've been running and chasing for the last, I don't know how many years, and I don't need this any longer from you, John. Attempt to bring closure, because see, that's you're telling yourself you're kind of done with this, and this dream doesn't have to come anymore because you got the message. See, our dreams are about sending us messages of things that we are unfinished business. And you've done unfinished business in the dream, which a lot of people aren't able to do. I don't have lucid dreams. I would be out of luck. You're one of the fortunate people that have lucid dreams where you know you're in the dream and you're able to change the dream. So see, if you have other chasing dreams in the future, again, remembering to turn and confront, and you felt better after it. It didn't make you feel worse. So there's some chance of that. But if you had this experience again with something else, certainly we could meet again if you wanted to work through it again, and to kind of go over what it was. But I think that in your case, you're creative enough to maybe just take care of it yourself. It's like opening a door and finding the answer to a question. It's like on that show that had three doors that you picked from. This time you picked at the door that got into dealing with this unsolved issue, being able to let go and move on from that. At some point in the future, you may decide you want to work on some level of forgiveness, or you don't have to, but I mean, that might be yet another step at some point. But right now, I think you're in a good place, and you have the skills and you have the motivation, I think, which is really important to continue doing what you're doing, to be Alice 75 and not Alice at 30 or whatever. And you're a much different person knowing what you know now.
So that means we would meet for like next week and then maybe another time.
Well, we can meet as long as you're comfortable with this and that we feel that any progress is being made. But I think at this point it might be premature to stop meeting, because I want you to get really comfortable with your relationship with Gloria in terms of how in the here and now you're doing this. Because if you can continue to do this in the here and now, dreams aren't going to be as confounding as these have been. And you got the message from your higher self or whatever, and you took charge of it and you confronted it. Confronting something face head on is really healing. You're feeling better. It's sort of like, what is your idea of healing? I mean, do you consider this something that would be a healing level? I'm curious.
And you remember when we first started, I would always just get mad
Mm-hmm.
and shut shut myself kind of away. You've helped me learn that really doesn't work. It doesn't do me any good.
And once you let go, there's this really kind of relief feeling. I think you'll observe that over the next few weeks as well, that you feel different because you're looking at things differently. It's all how we see things. I think that will be an important element of this as well. So I see that our time today is getting short, and I want to do the session rating scale. But before that, let's talk about, and you've been really good about homework, because I think you really have been invested in getting control of this situation and moving on. So during this week, if you have a recurring dream again like this, what were you going to do that was different than the one you just encountered with the script? You're going to change it again, right?
Do you mean my last experience I told you about this morning?
Yes, we talked about you might have another one. So if you have another one, what would you what additional would you say to him to kind of recognize that this is over and it's not effective anymore?
I don't know what he's going to do, of course. So I might wait and see what he says. And if it goes like it's always gone, I'll use my iMessage. Is that what we
Okay,
call it?
yes. And then also maybe saying in the dream, we don't need to have this encounter any longer. It isn't useful for me, or something to that effect, to try to dismiss the dream from your life at this point. Because it is possible to end recurring dreams, which I think you may have with this, but in case there's another one, you may have to just reinforce this, is what I'm saying. That I think is important. And then also, as we move towards the closure, I want to explore with you what kind of red flags may come up to you to how things went in the past in terms of your being down as opposed to being even. You have any kind of physical experience when people start attacking you that are kind of like a red flag that, oh yeah, this is not right, to make you or help you raise back onto more of a grounded level? Because I like what you do now. Not only do you in a sense, turn and face, but you you raise your shoulders. So those shoulders are a good the new normal for you. But the old was to probably feel more down. So could you talk about that a little to see what the red flags were that set you up?
Yeah. I used to get like a knot in my stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And it would just, then I would get angry.
Yes,
And
it's a trigger.
it is okay. And then I would get afraid. And that's mainly, I guess, my reasons for not talking a lot more, just living back in a way.
So when you have that cue, and this is important because the physical body is a really good place to let us know. If you get that sense in the gut in the future, how might you shift from down to up? Like in the dream, there was the two things that you did is that you faced it, whether you want to. So facing and the shoulders are a way to. It's sort of the anti-gut cue, because you were talking about how it raised the emotions, kind of like at those carnivals where people hit the ball and it goes up the chute. It's sort of like the this to here is like immediate, but when you get this, you might do this, because again, it's because physically, I think we have a lot to do with how we're presenting and emotionally, but by doing this, it might short circuit you letting it pass. Because when you're in this position, you're ready to let go, but not in a unwielding way, but to defend or to share your feeling. It's not so much about defending, but it's standing up and saying, "No, this isn't right," in your mind, and then addressing it, like you did with her that day that we talked about last week. Because I want you to be kind of ready. See, if you understand your mechanisms and the red flags and how you might change because you have a new stance, think about, oh, the new stance, and it's this. How's that? Does that sound ridiculous or?
In the dream, I felt strong.
Mm-hmm.
Like this.
So see, it's like going from weak to strong. Because when we get punched in the belly, we're weak. But if you move off of that imbalance and you become strong, as opposed to getting into the weak, it moves you into where you want to be.
Yes.
And but see, we still have some work to do. See, that's why I'm not suggesting we terminate our sessions, because I think there's still some things that can reinforce your being who you want to be, and not lose sight of that. And so, as you become more aware of that, and we'll be talking more about these examples in the coming week, when you feel really that you got it, that's when you can talk about, well, I think I've got it now. Because after you get it, you can only get it so much, right? I mean, and it's working, and you've reached your goal. I mean, I think reaching goals in life is really a huge thing, and something to really celebrate. And so we can talk about celebration as well. What are you going to do to celebrate as well? But I think the key is to remember confidence. You're confident now that you weren't before. And I see you have those wonderful pearl earrings again. Those pearl earrings are signs of success for you, as you were telling me before, and happy times in your life, happy times that can become contented time, dividing what the two meanings are. So why don't we move then today, and do you have anything else?
No, Dr. George, I just want to say I just appreciate this so much. It's made me feel so much better.
You're doing all of it too. You recognize that, and how well it was when you did it this last week. So it's just a positive, ongoing kind of thing. So let's bring up the session rating scale, and of course you remember this from the last few weeks that we started working with this scale. Mark the line that's nearest the description that best fits your experience again, and I'll read the under each of the four. Under the relationship, I did not feel heard, understood, and respected, or I felt understood and respected today. What number would you give that item?
Oh, a 9.
Okay. And under goals and topics, we did not work on or talk about what I wanted to work on or talk about today, or we worked on and talked about what I wanted to work on and talk about.
Now, what's my highest number?
It's a 0 to 10. 10 would be the highest number.
Dr. George, you get a 10. I feel very good about what we did today. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that's good feedback. Thank you. Approach or method. The therapist's approach is not a good fit for me, or the therapist's approach is a good fit.
Well, it worked. So I think maybe a 9 there.
Okay, very good. And then, of course, the overall. There was something missing in the session today, or overall, today's session was right.
It was very, very good. I can't do a 9.5, so.
Yes, you could. Remember, we were doing percentages, so you could do a 9.5.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And as we were talking about, and to reinforce, try to pay attention to your encounters with Gloria to see how you felt, And again, remember this hitting in the gut, and remember this is kind of the trigger, and this is the response, as opposed to the trigger and it's going to be a trigger and you in charge. And I think that would be a good direction. Does that seem to be a reasonable kind of thing to reflect on this week?
Did you see me practicing?
Yes, I really like that. You see it become a normal thing in terms of as you do it more. And then, okay, so there's that. And then if the dream recurs, you're going to revisit it with the script and slightly shift it that you don't need it anymore. And that would be...
Got it.
And that sounds like a good direction. And we'll meet again next week, and have a great week ahead. I think you're really in a good direction here.
Thank you. You too.
Hey, George. Welcome back. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a good week. I was really happy that she was able to confront John in the dream and have a positive experience from the event this week.
Excellent. So she was able to confront him. How did that go?
Well, it went quite well. And, we talked last week about her having some other movements that might go with the program. And so I think this really came out well because she felt good about it. I think she felt empowered, and that finally it's time that this stopped in her life. She didn't need it anymore. So then we talked about having that said, and that it had gone well. I then brought up the discussion you and I had last week about where she felt in her body red flags in terms of being used, the feeling like an object. And she
Right.
said it hit down here in her stomach, or the solar plexus areas where she was pointing, and that it escalated to an explosion. And that's what I was trying to emphasize to her before the dream, that she didn't want to lose control. And so I then connected this to her turning and planting her feet down, and the shoulders were really a good piece of this because it helped in terms of that previous way of responding to feeling like an object and coming back to being on equal standing. And so I explained to her that when the red flag, when that feeling is there in the future, when she's got that gut feeling, she needs to stand, the stance and the shoulders were the offset. And she really got into that, I think, well, and felt confident with that. And then when we were talking about it later, and I talked about that again, she said, "Did you see me raise my shoulders?" And so she was actually practicing it, whether it was subconscious or intentional. It was just sort of, they went up. So I thought that was a really positive outcome of the work. And now she has some notion about how she physically experiences it as well as emotionally, how they kind of go together. And one can kind of help direct the other, because the shoulders now mean to be more in control of the situation, subconsciously. And
Well, it's interesting too, because in boxing, George, I don't know how familiar you are with boxing. Effectively, one of the easiest ways that we protect ourselves from oncoming blows, especially from the side, is we duck our chin, and guess what? We raise our shoulders. Well, effectively protecting the sides of our face, and then just hands up close. So there's protection in that as well.
So that's kind of an innate kind of movement, I guess. But she was really into that. And so I thought that was a good direction. And she said she felt so much better after the experience.
Excellent. That's great to hear.
And so we talked about, at some point, termination. But then I went on to emphasize that there were other things that we needed to do to cement things down for her. And that, when she felt it was time, then it would be time. I said, "You also have control now of whether you want to continue seeing me or not." And I said, "That's also an important place to be when you decide it's time to stop, to terminate our therapeutic relationship."
Right.
So then again, this led eventually down to a nice kind of closure with the SRS discussion, leading into the homework at the very end. So I was able to again close by the homework, which I thought sealed kind of what we had done over the week. First, I mentioned her work with Gloria continuing and supported that. And then I said, if the dream occurs, we talked about how you need to kind of make some sort of statement about it's time to stop because you've resolved the issue, or however you want to put it. And so she seemed to be good with that. Following up with what we said, I thought I was able to talk about closure because I think she had some successful movement both here and then the work with Gloria. But we're not quite ready yet. So I talked a little bit about some details about what further we would do. And then by closing this, we went with continuing to build on her work with Gloria and her assertion work, actually her work on herself, to be more self-assertive and confident about herself. And then I don't expect the dream will occur, but if it did, I just wanted to make sure there was some sort of pre-discussion about that, so there's not yet another script fix or adjustment. Next week, I definitely will work with putting together some things about helping to anchor this in some sort of journalistic way. And I think the artwork can be very powerful, so I'm waiting to see what she constructs in that way as well. So that's kind of so lucid dreaming in this case again was successful in terms of my work.
You shifted her out of a more so reflective practice into a much more active process with this.
Yes.
Right, and in action, right. How best to say it? In order to achieve change, there must be action.
Right, and it was a holistic approach because we were doing all of the learning pathways. We were doing kinesthetic, auditory, and visual as well.
Right.
The running, the turning, the hearing, the talking, and I think that holistic kind of thing really helps to bring together things in a way that I think in this case was at some level a healing experience as well, that was a little more inward,
right,
going on. And hopefully the image that she does in the journal work will help kind of describe that or depict that a little more for her. And it's something she can handle. because I think talk therapy is okay, but I think in some of the work that we do, if we involve the whole person in the action and the hearing and the seeing and all of the senses, I think is a really important way to bring things together.
And I mean, I would offer an agreement that there are many cultural practices out there that support that and agree with you wholeheartedly, as well as scientific evidence too.
Well, and I like your comment about, boxing and the stance of protection, which is what she was doing, which is interesting. I mean, it seems to fall in a lot of areas of our lives in terms of how we. In the past, she wasn't using the body armor to protect herself, was she? She let go, and and the wave went over rather than stood up, and the wave stopped. Because that's what happened with Gloria. In fact, I'm going to reflect that again for her next week as another way of looking at it. But this is a really great idea. It affects how Gloria was really offset by that. And then, of course, the dream figure, the same thing. It's like they're not getting in. See, they're not getting in, so she loses it. So I'm going to have to kind of include that. I think that's really a good other metaphor for this whole experience.
With the one caveat, since a lot of this has, resulted in some emotional dysregulation and screaming and whatnot, that we don't want to actually coach towards boxing.
Although that may not be bad for her, but she's 75.
Aerobic kickboxing is a great option.
Yeah. Or chair boxing, as they might say these days in nursing homes.
Perhaps. There's a program made for her.
I'm really happy to see that she was very resistant, and then finally she somehow, I don't know what happened, but there was a nice shift at some point in the last 3 or 4 months that really helped move us into maybe it was just she was over it. I mean, sometimes people have to get over it.
Right. And I mean, I would say more so on a human level that disparity or becoming desperate can also be a very, very motivational factor as well.
Yes.
It hasn't sounded as much that she was in a state of despair or desperate, because it was much more so that she had just accepted this as this is what the rest of her life was going to be, right? And you and I both know that there's always the potential for change. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what they experience. If the work is done, there is a likelihood, and we're not talking about moving mountains, but there is always the possibility of some change, even if it's just on a minimal level. Again, I think that transference that she experienced that we were talking about last session, where, she saw a lot of her like children's coaches in the past, and was kind of connecting on a deeper level with you through those past experiences as well, and see you kind of as this coach and this guide, this mentor, if you will, probably serve to at least soften the fortifications that she had already built up, and then your continued presence, your calmness, your ability to meet her on her level where she's at. Really kind of opened up the door for you guys to do this work, and this is a pretty big breakthrough for her.
I think it is, and I think she will reach closer to what we called contentment now than these things in the past, because I think finally discovering who we are, I think, is a real a tremendous gift to self, and but it's hard to come by. And sometimes it takes 75 years, But I mean, as I told her, if she was 90, it would be fine. But now she's 75, she has more years to go with it. So that was kind of fun too, She kind of liked that.
It's okay. Now she gets to go and make these years golden.
Yeah. So I'm pleased.
But a couple of things come to mind, right? And certainly not trying to rain on the parade or anything, but now we're going to shift into potentially a period where she is without this traumatic event every single night. And what life is going to look like and how life is going to feel is going to be very, very different, even without just per se that one piece, right? And we're going to utilize that to also inform her practice and assertiveness with Gloria as well. And so it'll be curious to know, and I'm happy to hear that you reassured her that termination was not going to come quickly, that you guys are going to continue to work together, because now what we have to do is we have to become comfortable and kind of stabilize at this next level.
Well, and next week I may make some suggestions. I don't practice hypnosis, but I can make some suggestions that maybe now that she has space for either not dreaming and having a much better night's sleep, or she may be having dreams of her son or her husband affirming her for being able to take charge of herself, like those earlier dreams a few years ago.
Right.
And and because those were positive, and I suspect that they would be if she had them again.
Right. I mean, to suggest that she may even just look forward to sleep at this point would be
Yeah.
significant.
So we may do that, and but I will work with her on the journaling and the way of having a space that she can connect with in the future. And but I suspect that we'll be closing out now as things begin to go into the next month or so. I look forward to her telling me she doesn't need to see me anymore, and
Right.
I'll do what I can to get her to make that decision as opposed to me.
Oh, right. And I mean, we can also always utilize kind of the tactics of how about we space out our sessions a little bit more, do a gradual step down. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable.
Yeah, every 2 weeks and then gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that could come about in a month or so, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because she's also going to have to learn that she can do this without you.
Right. And I think that's very important. That's what,
We both know that she's the one doing all the work. You know, you're in her life as this guide, as this therapist, but she's the one that's been doing the work, and she's really been doing it independently all along.
Right.
But she may not feel or see that as of yet.
So that's why I have to keep re-emphasizing that, and then having her do her work as well, because it's all self-generated, really.
Right.
And
Right.
so in a sense, I really am kind of like a coach, even though this is therapeutic from the psychotherapy element of this, because that's really what we were working on, is the past as opposed to the future.
Right.
The future will ensue after the past is taken care of. But anyway, that's, I think, an interesting way to look at this, because there is kind of an overlapping sometimes of the stuff we do as therapists. But clearly, I didn't launch onto the thing about being her coach primarily because of that. I don't want to have any confusion.
Correct. Yes. And we always want to be careful about maintaining those professional boundaries.
Right.
I am thrilled for you as your supervisor, just hearing about, the positive steps that you're taking with this client. I would be curious to start probably reviewing a little bit some of those number scores going into the next couple of weeks.
Well, I would like to do that as well. As you view my videos too, have I reached a level of mastery or at least competency in how I'm doing this? I felt really good with this last one we did, but there's some things I need to do further. I really would want to, so that this becomes a normal kind of thing that I'm doing as part of my work with clients. So.
Right, absolutely. So we'll take a look at those videos over the next week. I can reflect on those and have some data and some information prepared for you.
Well, I think that helps, because there's the verbal, but then I think, like you say, the quantitative will be interesting to see how that's tracked as well. So tracking that and then looking at where she is in terms of her work. So I think that'll be good. I'll look forward to pursuing that next week. We hope you have enjoyed your journey through this Supervision CE. As we conclude our reflection today, we hope you have been able to look anew at your qualified supervisor practice. Feedback-informed treatment, deliberate practice, and trauma-informed care offer new opportunities to add structure and skill development for supervisees.